Hi, y'all. I just came back from an event, town hall with Senator Ruben Gallego at the Jerry Ambrose Veterans Council in Kingman, Arizona. And I thought I would share that town hall with you because I think Ruben gave a lot of good information about Veterans Affairs and something that is really important because as we're going into war, we need to take care of those who go to war and when they come back. And I thought this was a really good town hall. So here it is, and go.
Those who served us, Senator Gallego. Too. Oh, it's money. I'll talk to you later.
Well, first of all, thank you so much. And a couple of things for those that didn't hear, the Artemis space shuttle took off, went very well, it's going very smoothly. A great moment for our country in general. All together, we need one of those unifying moments. So I just want to say, congratulations. Just want to move some ground rules. We're going to try to keep this as apolitical and nonpartisan as possible. Especially our veteran committee, as you know, it is a mixed community. We want to make sure we're available to everyone. I'll give you my honest opinion, but it'll be opinion from a legislative perspective. And there's a lot going on, as you know. And then lastly, before we go into some short remarks, can we just have a moment of silence for the men and women that we've lost thus far in the war in Iran? Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And can't forget, that we're still in harm's way. First of all, thank you for hosting us. I greatly appreciate it. I know there's a lot of things that are going on within the community right now, and God knows there's a lot of work that you're doing right now. So some of us coming here are sometimes an interruption, but I promise we will be informative and we'll take questions. And also, of course, if you have constituent service requests, we do have people here from my office. We pride ourselves on trying to take care of all veterans issues. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Ruben Gallego. I was lucky enough to be elected senator for Arizona in 2024. Way prior to that, I had a way cool title of being a United States Marine, serving with a great group of guys, Lima 325 out of Iraq. I was an infantryman. There was a lot of Air Force guys who were making fun of me and talking to me slowly on the way in. Thank you, guys. Very proud of my service. It was a rough tour of duty for me in 2005. I was in Iraq in the Al Anbar region, largely doing insurgent interdiction. Took a lot of hard lessons from that. And then returning, like many veterans here, had a very rough experience with the VA. Couldn't get into the VA for services. They denied me any VA claims for basically 10 years. And my buddies who I served with were even worse off. I had a lot of friends that unfortunately committed suicide, found themselves homeless, were self-medicating since they couldn't get the services that they need. I had one friend who called me in the middle of the night and had to drive from Phoenix to Albuquerque, which doesn't seem like a big distance to y'all because you guys drive very far in this neck of the woods here. But he went to the VA. The VA did not have updated paperwork and told them, we don't think you ever were in combat. For someone that was already dealing with some very deep PTSD, and I had to drive across, the state lines to make sure he didn't, to kill himself. And that's really what got me motivated into getting into office. And the first bill I ever passed wasn't actually a bill that I had heard from other veterans called the in-state tuition bill, which as soon as you cross into the Arizona line, if you had a DD-214 and you were a veteran, you could pay in-state tuition, which because of the modern GI Bill basically made it for free. And this is something that I heard from veterans all over the country who told me, why is it that if I go to Idaho, even though I served my whole country, I have to pay an out-of-state tuition? And I thought, well, that's a really good point. So we changed that. And moving on to Congress, I served on the House Armed Services Committee, the VA committee, and then now in the Senate, I serve again on the VA committee. And the areas that I focus on are PTSD, housing, workforce, and then just in general the status of veterans in society. I've been very fortunate to be on the front lines, more unfortunate of what's happening. A lot of the fights when it comes to the VA. You know, I have a good relationship with the Administrator Doug Collins on a personal level. I have problems with some of the decisions he's made. We've been able to overturn a lot of those decisions. So some of them, for example, the VA staffing level ratios that we're going for would have just devastated the VA. As you know, and especially in rural America, it is hard to find some of the practitioners that can go to the VA hospitals, right? It's hard to get a doctor out here, period, right? Or a nurse here. And specialists, God bless you, right? You have to drive the whole way. Now, what was happening in the VA, because they were firing people and making it difficult to hire people, we had 40% reduction of people accepting positions, right? Now, that isn't the end of the world if you're in an urban area, because they could refer you out. But what happens when you're in a rural area? You're either just going to drive a very, very far away, or you're going to drive a very, very far away. And good luck if you don't have the transportation to do that, right? And thank God there's organizations like this that will actually get you in that car and drive you. But that's entirely depends sometimes on volunteers and time, everything else of nature. So we had a very united front, Democrats and Republicans, beginning this year to reverse that. They finally did. The damage was done. Talking to people that serve in the VA. My sister is a doctor, and she did part of her training in the VA. And she, told me about doctors that just refused to sign and just moved on to other programs. We're hoping to be able to reverse that, but we have to stop this. I would say the nature of them treating VA employees as being disposable, because once they're gone, they're gone. Our second big thing we were fighting was an attempt to use AI essentially to look through everybody's VA claims and start doing reductions in disability. Now, I am not against efficiencies, right? If you can use technology to help somebody get their claims faster, I am 100% for that. If you want to use the VA to figure out AI to figure out how to get, scheduling better at the VA, right? Because you guys have all done it. I've done it where I try to get something scheduled at the VA, and good luck. If you don't get the right call and you don't get the right referral, look, there's ways that technology can help us do it. But if you're going to use AI to go and take veterans' disability benefits away from people who don't really understand the VA, and hearing the ideas of what they thought was going on about how those people that are veterans that are trying to basically scam the system, it was very scary. And because of good popular uproar from Americans, again, all across the country, they're able to stop that. Now, I fear that they may try to do it in a sneaky way, but at a minimum, we have to be on the lookout for that. Because what I don't want to see is somebody who has received VA benefits, let's say you're at 50% versus 60%, and they drop you down to 50%. What they're going to do is they're going to ask for that 10% back, right? And they'll accumulate it over time. I'm sure you guys have heard the clawbacks that they've done before. They'll just go forward and they'll just start taking money out from the VA, your VA disability going forward until basically you pay off and or die. And when things are so expensive right now, how can we actually ask any veteran to do that, right? So we're able to stop that. Other areas that I've been working on bipartisan manner is just different therapies. We're talking about equine therapy, for example. Not everyone responds to normal PTSD therapy, right? I eventually did finally go get PTSD therapy. It took me years to get to it, and it took a long time for it to start to really work. There are other people that have other types of therapies that we are just not even looking at. For example, equine therapy is one of them. We've seen other people respond well to different types of drug therapies using MDMA, controlled MDMA, but we're not really exploring them. And so myself and another veteran named Tim Sheehy from Montana have sponsored a bill so we could set up 6 areas of research that we can research different types of therapy so veterans can get into therapy and actually have better effects. Now, we're not just going to let them, obviously do whatever they want. This can be under controlled by doctors. But right now, I'll give you an example. We have veterans that are going to Mexico and going to unlicensed therapists and, doing either MDMA, ayahuasca, or other types of drugs. And so far, we haven't heard of any, fatalities, but it can entirely happen that it could go and find a bad practitioner who just wants to steal money from veterans. So we'd rather have the VA to be a true research facility, and we could find the real therapies that are going to help all of our veterans. In terms of housing, we're about 1 week away from passing a bill that we've been trying to pass forever. There's a lot of veterans that have to make some tough decisions once in a while, where the voucher programs that we have for housing will sometimes count your VA disability bill towards your income cap. So if you make too much money because let's say you have a VA disability of 60%, which is about $1,700, right? In some places, that means you can't get a VA voucher and you can't get a housing voucher. So there are veterans who are not taking their VA disability because they're afraid they're going to get kicked off housing. So I have a bill, and it got passed on the Senate. We're hoping it gets passed into the House next week, and we're sure it will get signed. That will say if you are, in a situation where you need a housing voucher or really any type of housing assistance, your VA income will not be counted against you, right? And that's very much in programs that have any type of subsidized housing or anything else like that. And again, for a veteran, you don't want to put them in a situation where they have to decide, am I going to take the disability or am I going to try to get the housing and then still fight work? And so we're very, very proud of that bill, and we hope it's going to be going as fast as possible. With that, I am here to take any questions. Obviously, top of mind for me is the war in Iran. I do not think we should be going to war, just to be 100% honest. And if you go to war, you should plan for it. I think we plan for this war, and whether it's on the military side or on the other side, the consequences that come from that, such as high gas, cost of foods, everything else like that. I fear obviously for our troops over there, and for our allies, but we should not have done this. And this is more of experiences from my first war, right? There was a lot of regret for many of us that were in that war. I don't regret my service to my country. I don't regret, serving with the men that I did. But, going to Iraq was a mistake, and starting this war is only a bigger mistake. Now, the president's going to have some type of announcement today at 6, I think. So while we're here, and we'll pass on the message, whatever we hear, or if you guys want to hear anything, obviously we'll also disseminate that. Hopefully it is a good message. I actually, as I am an opposing party, I want things to go well. I want us to have a good end result. I want our men and women to be safe. I want this country to be strong. And hopefully whatever he says actually puts us in that direction. But with that, we're going to have questions. And we have someone over here running around with a mic. If for some reason I can't get you an answer, don't feel too frustrated. It's not because I'm dumb. It's just because it's a big government. But we will actually try to actually get you an answer if you just give us your name, your email, and we could also do follow-up with you then. Okay. And then with that, just raise your hands. We can start over here.
Okay. The quick question I have is the bill that you just talked about, this has the bill number of that?
It is. The bill that I'm talking about is part of called the Road to Housing bill. It passed out of the Senate, I want to say about 3 weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, and it's now on the House floor. And if you just say Road to Housing, you get it. And also if you get with my team, we'll give you the actual Senate number. Yep, no problem. Yes.
So a lot of, in Havasu, they just had a new facility. But even that, the people are a little afraid that they're going to close it.
Okay.
Do you have anything on that? Because they closed a lot of places.
Yeah, this is the one. It's a VA center though, not a hospital, right?
Right.
The community centers. So we've been pushing back on this administration because they have this idea that somehow they keep collapsing these centers into like put them into bigger spaces. It'll be more efficient. The problem is that is a very East Coast way of thinking because in the East Coast, if you collapse a VA center, it is entirely possible that only 2 towns away there is something else. The only thing is like 2 towns away over there is 5 miles versus 2 towns, 2 towns away from here is an hour and a half, right? And so we've been on top of the administrator to stop closing the VAMCs, especially in the western parts of our country, because it is absolutely tough for us to do it. So I've not heard the Havasu one being closed down, but it's because they kind of put a stop to all the closures just because of the strong pushback. We're staying on top of it though, because obviously once they close down, it's even harder to get them back up. So we'll be very, very on top of it. I saw a hand right there, Mr. Blue. In the blue down. All right, good. Just kidding. Yeah, this one right there. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, you're good. You can use the mic, but you don't have to. You don't. Would you
Welcome to the guy. Don't mind if I'm failing. Simplify, Mac.
Simplify, brother.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I'm a window lender, so.
Speak slowly to me.
Could you give an example, please, of Congress collaborating in a nonpartisan way to ensure funding reaches the local communities and viable nonprofit organizations that support veterans after the initial crisis stage, like USG people, particularly during transition to stable housing, employment, and finding the funds again?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of ways that has happened, and I like your question because I think people miss the most important period is that time period when you tap out from whatever service before finding somebody their housing, finding somebody a purpose in jobs or schools is a great way to make sure that they are transition out. And I think one of the biggest things I dislike about kind of the stereotype of veterans is that we're all effed up, right? But in fact, veterans are some of the most put together population of this country. They're patriotic. They start businesses, start families, everything else like that. And the most important thing we want to do is make sure that we catch them before they go to the ground so they could have success. So, give you the examples that I've worked on, right? My bill with to give in-state tuition for veterans, that was actually a very bipartisan bill. Number one, it's bipartisan. I did with an Air Force guy. I mean, but number two, he was a state rep from Southern Arizona, a guy named Ted Vogt, and a Republican, right? We're very lucky to work together. He talked about the kind of therapy I was just telling you about. Tim Sheehy, he's a senator from Montana, also Navy, so bipartisan, Republican also, and a Navy SEAL. So we know he's going to write a book about this whole experience. I have a movie deal on it, but we've had a really good experience working on that. The protections that have been happening in terms of protecting the VA, I think have been bipartisan this year. You've heard of obviously me yelling at them, but actually it's been Democrats and Republican senators that have been pushing back against the cuts. In terms of the kind of the VANCs that we're talking about, the Veteran Affairs medical centers that they're trying to reduce, we've had a lot of help from our Republican colleagues in that regard. The housing initiative that I was telling you about, sir, that is also a Republican sponsored bill of mine. And we worked with that jointly. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else on top of my head. Oh, we're trying to change also, it's not happened yet, but we're trying to change how you could use the VA. So for example, traditionally people think about the VA, it's like you graduate, you tap out of your service, you go to college. We give you 4 years of college, housing, books, everything else like that. Well, not everyone wants to go to college, right? But if you get an apprenticeship, a lot of times you won't get paid from the GI Bill for that apprenticeship, and you won't get housing for it, right? Even though the goal of the GI Bill is to give a pathway to an education and stabilization for that veteran. Why aren't we giving them housing in the meantime? Why aren't we allowing them to actually draw down a salary if the depression doesn't pay for it? Why can't they use it for housing, for food, things of that nature? So that's something that we're working on in a bipartisan manner. So a good example, I'm sure there's a lot of retirees that were in the trades. You know, if you leave the Marines and want to work for a trade, and that trade has an apprenticeship program that doesn't actually pay you any money, the GI Bill will only cover a certain portion of that. We want to make sure it covers it the whole time. It gives you housing included, because we all know how important that is, and other benefits that includes, for example, can you use it to pay for your tools, right? If you go to college, you could use the GI Bill to pay for your computer, for your books. If you go to become a pipe fitter, you can't use the GI Bill to pay for your tools, your welder, or anything else like that. So this is a good example of a really good bipartisan effort to help out there. Lastly, just more again on housing, we're working on just making it much easier for someone to access the VA home loan. I know some of you guys have taken the VA home loan. It can be easy sometimes, and sometimes it is difficult to use the VA home loan because depending on the area, you could have inspections that take too long. If you overappraise or underappraise, you're out. And so we're working to make that simpler for veterans to be able to use that. I think that's off the top of my head. That's what I've come up with. Now, if anything else comes up, I'll tell you. Just pop in my brain. Thanks for your question. Fine, go ahead.
So one of the bills that got passed on the floor was the have it written down here, is is opening up to national parks for veterans.
Yeah,
In
my
2020,
favorite one, yeah.
you guys passed another one that'll allow all veterans to have access to the park.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really great. In fact, when I went to Yellowstone, they said, "Oh, you're a veteran. We can give you a lifetime pass." I was all in tears.
Yeah, it's you and your family also.
It's correct. My question though is that why don't we have that for fishing and hunting as veterans, even if it was in the in-state, for me to be out of state now in Arizona and go back to Montana, they cost me $900 for a hunting license.
Yeah.
But you should be ready to do that.
So because most of the hunting and fishing licenses are all state-based, so we don't have much control of that at the federal level. And I couldn't tell you what the state the state is. The one area that I believe is because they probably have to make an assessment, because state licenses for hunting and fishing usually go back into the conservation programs of the area, and maybe it would cost too much. The reason we actually did the VIP program, the Veterans of Park program, so I was a sponsor with Congressman Miller Meeks from Iowa on that, was because we understood two things. Number one, that veterans, and certainly I did this when I got back from the war, use our parks as kind of like an exhaust valve, right? They're so stressed out. It's hard to get de-stressed in cities. And we wanted them to be able to use our national parks and monuments, by the way. So it's all national parks, forests, and monuments. So they can enter without paying any fee. We realized that a lot of them want to bring their family, so you could bring your family also with that. You just go show them your ID one time, then you get a permanent card to come in. And we realized that number one, it wasn't going to cost that much to the system if you had veterans that were going. Two, it was good for the veteran to get out, get healthy, walk around, de-stress, and it was just better for the overall system. And we found that it actually has increased participation. Veterans are using our national monuments, parks, and forests more. And for the businesses around them, they've actually seen also an increase in veterans going and staying at the hotels, the restaurants. So it's been a very, very good program. And why deny someone access to a forest just because they can't afford that $15 entrance fee? Other questions? Yes, sir.
I was in the service in 1968. Now when I retired in 1988, it's 50% pension of the wages at that time. Okay, now we're talking 38 years later, and I will tell you the cost of living has not kept up with the cost of living. But there are two separate measures of the cost of living, and they always use the one that hurts the seniors the worst. Can we take a look at improving the system that they use?
Yeah. So I've been a sponsor of the change in the cost of living, because the cost of living especially the way that they annually put it together. When it comes to your COLA increase for the VA or for Social Security, for example, doesn't include things like medical and prescription costs. And I don't have to tell everyone here. I mean, that'll drive your budget, your personal budget insane, especially because all it takes is one drug that you suddenly get that all of a sudden it's just going to throw you out of whack. So I've actually been a big supporter of that adjustment. It, you know, the reason it doesn't happen is because it costs money, right? And the government is very good about finding money when they want it, but when they don't want something, they could always find an excuse not to do it. That's one of those areas that really frustrates me. I think we will eventually get it because the price of drugs is just going through the roof. We have to take care of that issue separately from this COLA issue, but we need to take care of it anyway. The VA, for example, does something really good, and so does the DoD. They actually negotiate for the price of their prescription drugs to keep it as low as possible. But for those that are get their prescriptions from Medicare and Medicaid, very few of those drugs are actually negotiated, and that ends up costing all the taxpayers money too, right? Yeah. And the crazier part is, you guys probably don't do it here because it might be too far, but I live about 2 hours north of the border in Mexico. There's a lot of seniors that go to Mexico to buy the same drugs made by the same manufacturers, sometimes literally just 1 mile south of the Walgreens in Sonora, or 1 mile south of Douglas or one of San Luis, will be a totally same pharmacy with a different name, same drugs, and it's significantly cheaper. So that is a overall problem that we have to deal with. It's been a problem that Democrats and Republicans have said they're going to tackle. We just have not, to be honest, but we should. And it's a great way to save money and bring costs down for everybody. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah. You got one to go.
Okay. So one of the things that we deal with here is to be qualified to live in our transitional housing program is you have to be 180 days of connected service.
180 days of connected service.
Yeah. So I'm a reservist. I have 270 days of service. But if I was homeless, I couldn't come into this facility as a veteran. We have veterans that need to go to boot camp, have training, go ready to combat, get injured. They serve less than 180 days. They would not be able to come to this program. It's a congressional thing that was passed, I think, back in the 90s. I'm curious if there's any work being done there, because it really is just, it's unfortunate for veterans. We all serve, and we shouldn't be penalized because we weren't there 180 days,
Yeah, you know what? Let me look into. I know there actually is, but I actually don't know what their status of it. In which, it's my 2 deployments were as reservists getting activated. I did 12 and 12. So in total, I ended up doing, what is that? Okay, I'm bad. I'm at 24 months. 4 months. And what's the, how many days is that? I failed math Marine guys. A lot. Right. But it's a good example though. Is like when a bunch of us started dying in my second deployment, they pulled guys from SOI directly to Iraq into School of Infantry. So you go from boot camp to School of Infantry. So that's usually boot camp is 3 months Marines. School of Infantry is usually 2 months. So they had these kids were basically out of basic 5 months, and they got sent to Iraq because our unit had taken about 1/3 of us were killed or wounded by that point. So we had like 18, 19-year-old boys that just got put in. And if you actually look at their total time, it's less than that. And they saw a lot of combat. And then they went back to being reservists too. So I think that's a really good point, Lonnie. Like, I'll have to check on it. Derek, you're on this. Okay. And I guarantee you could find some bipartisan support of that, because you can be in active duty for 24 months and not see any combat. Like I was rolling through a base called Al Assad in Iraq, and they had a Burger King there, and a Baskin Robbins, and they had people that were on weight control. I don't know how you're on weight control during Iraq in the summer, but those guys and girls were having a totally different war than I did. But because they were probably there longer, if I had less time, they probably would be seeing more benefits. So I think it's a very good point. I guarantee you, it's almost negligible to the overall budget when we start factoring in these men and women. Yeah.
I actually have a two-part question. What can we do as citizens to help you? You know, you're talking about helping us and helping those veterans down there. What can we do as citizens to help you? And number two is my feeling is if we're going to spend $100 to make a soldier, we need to put $50 away for veterans when they come back.
Yeah.
Oh, tell me, listen, I gotta tell you, okay, besides, so right now, for example, there's a bill that keeps getting rejected, this thing is too much money, which basically says if a veteran is receiving disability, they also can't be receiving a certain amount of their pension, right? Keeps getting rejected. And we're about to go and ask for more money for this war. Which clearly there's enough money because they're going to get the money to the war. But for these kind of veteran programs, you know, they're still giving us different reasons. The PACT Act, for example, if you guys remember the PACT Act, you know, the burden hit legislation, which was very impactful. First of all, thank you to the Vietnam veterans, because the only reason there's a PACT Act is because we learned what happened to Vietnam veterans because of Agent Orange. And when I got back from the war, you know, I didn't realize what was happening to us. So unfortunately, I forgot to tell you, like the other portion of my unit that we're having problems with is some rare cancers. And I've lost some, 2 or 3 guys already to rare cancers that young men should not be getting at this point. And because of the PACT Act, luckily, everything was covered. Before the PACT Act, if you came down with these rare cancers, it was on you or on your insurance or someone to pay for it, right? And then also getting a disability payment was even harder. But that only happened in when did we finally pass that? 2018, 2019, by 2019. We've been trying to get the PACT Act passed for almost 10 years at that point, because we learned as young veterans coming back from what our brothers and sisters who deal with the Vietnam War, that we didn't get on top of this now, then we would end up fighting it forever. And it took us that long, and the reason it kept stopping us was going to cost too much money, right? So you didn't have a problem saying it's to war, but by the way, while we're in war, you get 2 tax cuts. Throw that on there. But then when we get back from war, you tell us veterans like there isn't enough for us right now, and it's scary. Like for someone like me, I lived next to one burn pit and hit Iraq for a month. Guys to the left of me, to the right of me now have different types of ailments. Like I'm wondering, like, is this gonna happen? And at a minimum, I can't control that. At a minimum, I know my family's not gonna go broke. So your statement that for every $100 we invest, we should put $50 into them is true. Also, if you want people to join the military, they need to know they're going to get taken care of in case things go wrong, right? Because if we're an ungrateful country and we treat these veterans wrong, like by the way we did when Vietnam veterans got back from the war, you're going to have people say, why would I join? It's not worth it. And, it's going to be harder and harder for us to get these men and women to stand up and join us. Look, in terms of helping me, information is the most important thing, because I know how to, for example, Ani tell me that the fact about people being below a certain threshold, big help. I need to have other friends here. Talk to your members of Congress, make sure they understand the importance of the VA and the importance of medical care in rural America. I think we have a educational gap where people just don't understand how hard it is to get anything done or get any kind of services out in rural America because of time, distance, access. And a lot of times people are making assumptions that rural Arizona is like rural, like Illinois, right? It's not, for a lot of reasons. And so whenever you have, you guys are represented by CoStar here. Like, I'm not commenting on that. I'm just commenting on the fact that he's your representative. Please talk to him. He can be helpful in this. We and I just worked on a bill to help LaFosse County do a land transfer. But him understanding, at least when it comes to this, when it comes to veterans, when it comes to rural veterans, the importance of standing up for them, like he may be very helpful in that regard. Yes, right here. And then after you. Yeah.
Hi there. I just wanted to first thank you for your service. And thank you for coming to our small community. As the Vice Mayor of the City of Kingman, I was honored to be asked to do a letter of support for the tiny village. We have some congressional requests for spending.
Perfect.
So I'm hoping that you will give that some serious consideration.
Get all the information?
Yes,
Okay.
we got it, and we're tracking. All right. Well, we are tracking too.
Yeah, good. We have before, and we're big believers in it too.
Okay. This facility that just opened is a blessing to our community, but I know that housing would be an even bigger blessing. So some serious consideration and some money coming down to our community would be extremely helpful.
Absolutely. How many units is it doing?
72.
22. That's great. Awesome.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yes.
In Vietnam, there was a draft, and a lot of us were drafted for 2 years. But they went to boot camp, they went to training, they went to Vietnam, they came back, they had 3 months left. And they were offered the opportunity to get out of the service and go home or clean latrines for 3 months.
Yep.
But the price was a less than honorable discharge, which has cost him the ability to have VA medical care. Only 2 out of 3 veterans are eligible for VA medical care, and I think that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, we have done, well, first of all, if you have individual cases, please bring them to us. We were able to get one Vietnam veteran, craziest story I ever heard. Basically, gentleman, got sent to the hospital after taking a lot of shrapnel. Basically, here's they're about to runs back out, helps defend the base, and then, gets injured, gets sent back to the hospital, has a fallout with like his commanding officer because he shouldn't have didn't leave, and they basically sent him home with a dishonorable discharge. And everybody that could have helped him get out of dishonorable discharge basically died. And so it was 60 years later. No, 60. No, that was in Congress. It was 20. It was in 2019. 2019. After he left in 1960, so 40 years later, we were able to move him from less than honorable to honorable. So if you hear of those instances, please tell us. I'll do the research about that type of arrangement that you're talking about, because then if that's the case, then we probably would pass just a straight law saying that, for those within this time period. And look, we will have to at some point think about how we deal with the men and women that did leave. From my experience right now, especially in kind of the Iraq-Afghanistan war, there's a lot of men and women that, because of PTSD, ended up getting dishonorable discharges, right? So how is that just, right? So you get back from the war, you had a horrible war. I know one person from my end this actually happened to, and because of, drugs or violence that were induced by your PTSD, now you're getting kicked out. Now you're out with a less than honorable or dishonorable discharge. And now you can't get a government job. You can't get government programs. You can't use any VA. So there has to kind of be a general understanding, at least more flexibility when they're in the military from these, from their commanding officers, that this is, if it's caused, you can prove it's caused by PTSD. I'm not saying you have to forgive this person, but kicking them out, is probably not, I don't think it's the best interest of the country, nor that Marine or that military personnel. Maybe let them leave on a general discharge. And general discharges, if you guys remember, means that, with time, probably like a year, if you haven't messed up again, then you could get back to honorable. But we are, unfortunately seeing that happened to one of the guys that I served with, who was like my, left-hand man the whole time. And it was not a great feeling for him, because knowing, he was in the 7 months of the hardest combat of the war with me, and he leaves with a less than honorable, discharge after seeing the hardest one for really not doing anything wrong too. And it's crazy some of the stuff that happens there. Yes. Oh, thank you.
First of all, thank you for serving, and second of all, thank you for serving.
No.
On a much lower level, I also serve. I currently hold 3 political offices in my local county.
3. Are you crazy?
It's called having nothing else to do. What I wanted to address though on your bully pulpit is we need more veterans like you and me encouraging other veterans to run for political office. I think 90% of the battles we lose are because we're outmanned. And if we could get more veterans to start running for office, which means the local political parties reaching out and showing them how to do it. But I just wanted to let you know that if I could stay in contact with a member of your staff, I would be happy to jump in on that.
Yep. Everyone here, please stay in contact. We're here for everybody. Oh, yes.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank you for coming up here. Up in this part of the state, senators, best senators like we don't really, we've read about them and we've seen them in movies, maybe, and on TV. But
I've come to Kingman a lot. I
I've never seen you. Anyway, I was interested in your feeling about something. It seems like over the tussle that has been going on in the Senate over the SAFE Act, that the Democrats have been able to fall back on the, what do you call it?
Filibuster.
Thank you.
No
Filibuster. Filibuster to gain some advantage against anyone. And I think it's really, really ironic that your predecessor was basically run out of town for supporting the filibuster. At least that's my view. I just wonder if you have a view on what you think about the filibuster in general. And
I mean, look.
It's not a veterans issue.
Not a veterans issue, but that's all right. But it's not my job to help the other side. If the rules change, right? Like, and without a doubt. But, at some point, if that happens, then I'll play by those rules. While the rules are on the ground right now, then I'll play with the rules that are on the ground. Mm-hmm. And some of the stuff is existential. Like, Arizona, we love our early voting. 80% of Arizonans vote by mail early. The SAVE Act, when it comes to like the ID, that's not a problem because Arizona does that. Arizona has a very strong ID program. What it's really going to do to Arizona, it's going to get rid of the vote by mail. And that's something that I just think Arizonans are just going to be strongly against. And voting is a veteran thing.
It's nice that we have some MCOs in office.
Thank you. Let me see if anyone that we haven't done a question that will go back to you, Mike. Yes. Yeah. We catch you.
Hey, how you doing? Thank you for your service. Welcome to Kingman. I have a kid that would be eligible for the draft, and that's something that really scares me in this conflict because I don't support that, and I wouldn't want to send my kid there.
Right.
How do you stand on that?
Well, yes, I'm against the war, and while I would always advise people if you are up for service, go join the service. I don't think a draft is a good idea, even though I have my fits and fancies of it once. Just because, especially for us that with the infantry, you need to want to be in the military, especially in the infantry, if you're going to be in that type of fight. If you force somebody into that, I think it's not the best outcomes. Number two, I think as a country, we should be striving to make sure people want to serve their country, not being forced to serve their country. And if you have the opportunity to force people to serve your country, I don't think you're going to align your politics and your morals with that. And so, for me, this is why I think a draft is a bad idea, unless this is like existential threat, right? It's like we're being invaded or something of that nature, right? Do I think there's a draft coming? I don't believe there's a draft coming. There's sufficient amount of men and women in our military that it would make zero sense for us to need a draft of any sort right now. Not that I want to diminish how dangerous Iran is, but if we needed to, and if we were dumb enough to try to go to a full war against Iran, we have the capability to do it. But just because you have the capability to do it does not mean you should do it, right? Like we have the capability to blow up the world with nuclear weapons. We don't do it, right? We have enough military, Marine divisions and Army divisions to invade Iran, but we should. So this is why I think the draft is coming. You're not the first person I've had this discussion with. My godson, my sister, is also worried about her son. He just turned 18. She doesn't want him to get sign up for selective service. I'm like, you have to sign up for selective service. Like, you will permanently screw yourself if you don't sign up for selective service. But there is no draft coming. There is no draft coming. I can't tell you the extent of what's going to happen to this war because I'm not the president and I cannot get into it. And I'm just not there. It's my we're hearing a bipartisan effort, right? So I don't want to scaremonger y'all. The war is bad. I think things can go badly for us and for this country, but I'm not going to sit here and scare you that there is a draft coming because that's not going to happen.
Thank you.
And not because I'm the block, because I just don't think they actually need it. Anybody else? Now I'll go back to my meeting time. Don't ask me to remember everybody's name, but I try to do that.
Thank you, sir. Gallego. You mentioned the equine therapy for veterans.
Yeah.
I spoke briefly, and thank you for inviting me live. I spoke briefly with Lonnie concerning that and with Pat, and then you bring that up and it furthers my interest. I am here representing a nonprofit organization that I work with, the E3 Initiative. And one more aspect.
Is it for like Lance Corporals? Is that what the E3 stands for? That's kind of cool. I was almost a lifelong Lance Corporal. I ended up as a corporal.
It's not quite that.
No, too much.
You'll have to look us up.
Okay,
And finding funding for that, because that's going to be a part of our project, the E3 project, is equine therapy, plus a lot of different activities to shape veterans into leaders of our communities, corporations, and into the government. That's a program that we would call. What we're looking for now and having the problem with, our stumbling block is funding.
Yeah.
How you can get that money from states up enough, from the government down to states and local areas for that. Okay. So that's my question. Thank you for your services.
You too, Semper Fi. And I don't know the details of it sounds like a camp more than anything else, right? You guys are trying to create.
Yes, sir.
There aren't designated camps and programs that have come through the VA. There is one in southern Arizona. Do you know what I'm talking about there?
Yeah, Boulder Crest.
Boulder Crest, right? And I think they're opening up another one in central Arizona. So you might want to look at the model Boulder Crest just to see how they were able to model themselves to create the funding stream. But they are funded through the VA. So it is possible. I can't promise you anything that how to get it to direct or anything else like that. But if we can set up the model and you could follow the Boulder Crest model, one of these other ones, I think that there is funding there. We could probably also connect to some with the VA, right? That can actually help kind of set you in the right direction. So that way you can figure out what are the streams of funds that you can tap to bring down a program like that. So it has been done. It's been done in Arizona. So that way, it can be done. So I, continue to definitely urge to move forward. And I think once you also get that funding, what we have seen is it actually opens up a lot of nonprofit money from different foundations and also from corporations that also want to help out. So, I think you're going to have much success the way it goes.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. One more? Sorry, guys. I got to drive. Unlike Senator Kelly, who's got a private plane, I drive. Okay, so, next time you guys see him, because he always tries to get me to get on planes with him, just tell him this. Ruben doesn't want to be Richie Valens, and he doesn't want to be Holland. Thank you that this crowd actually understands that. One more question. Yes, and the reason I do have 3 kids. That's normally I'd hang out, but go ahead, guys.
Mojave County has twice the national average of veterans. We have 12.5% of veterans here. Half are over 65 and aging and in need of some sort of assisted living, but there's no way they can afford the veterans' homes. Okay, what are we going to do to help those veterans out? Okay, whose spouses are passing and all that.
Yeah. Well, the number one is there is a program for spouses to be paid to take care of their spouses at home. So make sure that we take advantage of that program. It's a very good program and actually has better healthcare outcomes for the veteran than actually sending them to a veteran home. So they're at home, they feel comfortable at home, they have less sickness, they have less incidence of injury. And there are programs also to be able to remodel those homes, to be able to, for them to actually live there. Because obviously, as you age, you may have to have ramps, things of that nature. So make sure to work with us and the VA if you need to get that funding. In terms of other housing, again, this goes back to the rural divide between the rural and urbans. We're going to have to do a bigger emphasis on traveling nurses as well as telemedicine in the meantime, because the ability for us to get one center, both let's say here in Kingman, the whole that city is probably not going to be able to do it because we just won't have the density and it'll be too expensive. But individualized programs where we help, for example, a veteran get a VASH voucher if they need housing, which you could work through this. I think a lot of you guys help people get VASH vouchers, right? And then work with VASH voucher, work with a traveling nurse, and potentially with a telemedicine is probably the second best thing we could do. It is possible probably to get like a center, but again, it'll be a drive, right? And so, would we expect someone to drive from Havasu to here? In theory, yes, but I mean that is a 1 hour and 45 minutes. 60 miles. Man, where's my driver? He drove slow today. Then. Oh, it's because we went the other way. No, because we went to qualify first and then turn around and come back here. Sorry, it's been a day. Been driving. So that is probably the combination. So and so if you find yourself in this situation, please do reach out to us. And Lonnie, you have closing remarks? Last rounds?
Yeah, so I think in that question, and that we actually had this happen a couple weeks ago. We had a gal call out. Her husband was a Vietnam Marine veteran, died of cancer in November. Their two incomes held allowed them to live. And when he died, his benefits went away. And then she got evicted because she didn't have the money to pay for her house. And we were trying to figure out a way to help her so we established the spouse was not a veteran.
Right.
And so it's the surviving spouse of a veteran that passed away that has no resources, especially as they become elderly. And that's something that we're seeing more of, and that's a struggle. And so how do we help those
Yeah,
spouses?
checking that because they don't. So yeah, because if you have a VA, so I receive a VA disability, but when I pass, my wife doesn't get that.
If you're 100, even if you're 100%, if you died for some, like you got killed in a car accident or a plane, it doesn't count against your VA benefits, so they don't get the
Right.
Doesn't get found.
But if in the normal sector, like non-civilian sector, she would receive Social Security benefit, but not the pension benefit or the VA. So that's a good point to work on too. Well, we'll have to look into that too. I have no answer on the top of my head, to be clear.
Yeah, I don't think this is good. I mean, even if you're a vet, if you went into war, and you got killed as an 18 or 19 year old, you're married, then as soon as you're dead, then your benefits go away. You might have gotten that $10,000 life insurance policy,
right?
And then your family no longer has any benefit.
If you're active duty and you die on active duty, your spouse does get some benefits. They do get benefits. And the problem is if you're not married. All right, but that's a good thing to work on. I think it's a good idea. Maybe on the housing side, they should be scared. So
Thank you, Senator, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.